Hello, Deb Dana. I'm so happy to have you with me and with us today. We're going to talk about many different things, and especially because we are launching a new book, a new French book of one of your English book, but we are also celebrating the success of Anchored. So I really want, and there's another project with a workbook that you've written. So let's start with the beginning for people who don't know, because we're talking about polyvagal theory. We're talking about the vagus nerve, talking about anchoring in ventral, all those terms that are kind of complicated. But maybe how did you become who you are in this polyvagal world, and what is polyvagal? That's a lot. Maybe you can take the whole question for the hour.
All right.
But how did you meet polyvagal theory, and why has it been so important in your life, and maybe in the life of a therapist, and in the life of everyone?
Yeah. Well, I met polyvagal theory. I love that way of thinking about it. I bumped into polyvagal theory because I read Steve's first book.
So when you're talking about Steve, it's Stephen Porges.
Steve Porges, yes. Sorry, Steve Porges, who at that time was someone I looked up to. And it was, and he, to me, was this big famous scientist who had created this amazing thing. And, he was Dr. Porges, and now he's Steve, right? All these years later, now he's like a friend, and, we email back and forth about having coffee in the morning, and it's lovely. So he's become part of my world, which is lovely. But when I bumped into his work, I had always thought neuroscience was important in my work as a therapist. I thought it was important for my clients to understand how their brains work, because we were working with their brains as we were doing therapy. And then I read Steve's book, and it was like, oh my, right? We're working with their nervous system, really. And then their nervous system is sending the information to the brain. But if I really want to work with my clients and help them make the changes they want to make, it's not the brain I need to work with, it's the nervous system. And from that point on, I was obsessed with understanding polyvagal theory. And so I read everything that I could that Steve had written. And if you've read his work, you'll know he's a brilliant scientist, and his work is what I would call a deep read. And so the more I read, and it was repeated in different ways over and over, I thought, well, I'm beginning to understand this, right? And then I reached out to him and asked if he would come to Maine, which is where I was living at the time, and was in a small group practice. And we loved to have, what we considered big names in our clinical world come and speak to us. And we thought, well, Steve would be great, because he's really talking about what we therapists need to understand. So I reached out to him, and he said he would love to come to Maine. And I thought, it felt just sort of easy, which is so funny to think of when you're trying to arrange something that felt as big as that. But he came, and I had started playing around with his theory, because we'll talk about his theory in a moment, but it's so relevant to clinical work. And yet it was a scientific hypothesis that I went to thinking, how can I bring this into my work with clients? Because they too need to understand how they are human, which is the nervous system. And I think I drove my colleagues crazy for the first many months, because I would, create something and bring it in and say, try this out with me. And we started, speaking this language. And at some point, they all just gave in and said, great, we'll be your test pilots. Right. And they would try out different maps, different ways of understanding. And some of them, are now incorporated into my work. They are a foundational part of the work that I do, and other ones were tried once and thrown out. So, that is what happens when you're experimenting with things. Some things seem really good when you're thinking about them, but they don't work out so well. And other ones are like, wow, that's just really, really an easy way to understand the nervous system. So, it's became my life's passion, which is interesting. When you think about a before and after moment in your life, you don't recognize it in the time often. But I look back and I think that was a before and after moment for me. I discovered Steve's work. I started bringing it into clinical work. Steve came and really loved what I was doing, and my life changed. Right. I before that, I was a private practice clinician living in Maine, very happy seeing complex trauma clients and doing work with sexual abuse treatment, and really happy in the work I was doing. And now it's a different life. It's so fascinating to think. I mean, here we are talking about books that I've written. And it's like, oh wow, yes. So the lesson that I take from that, and I love to share with people, is if you have something you're interested in, and you think, oh, maybe I could fill in that sentence and do it, because you never know what's going to happen. Yeah.
So it changed your life. It changed mine.
It changed yours. It's changed a lot of people's lives, which I so appreciate. Steve's work is brilliant and really has the power to change lives. And I have been lucky enough to be, the person who started translating his work into clinical application and then into sort of the world of everyday curious humans, as I like to call us, because clinicians are my people. I am a clinician, and I want clinicians to be able to use this. And so many people in the world are never going to see a therapist. And yet they also need to understand their nervous system. And so, some of the books that you have so, wonderfully translated bring the work into the world of curious humans who don't need a therapist to begin to befriend their nervous system. And so it's that both and that I think is so important, especially in the world we're living in today.
I think this befriending your nervous system, and it's always hard and tricky to translate into French, is really something that you brought, that you came with, and that the Polyvagal Theory helped you go to, and that's something you invite people to do, befriend our nervous system, which means, what does it mean, befriending our nervous system? And maybe that's how we can also explain Polyvagal Theory in simple words, because the work that you've done is really like what you said, translating Steve Porges' hard writing kind of really, really deep into science and etc. So it's hard for everyone, but what you've done is really translate it into words and a language that everyone can understand, both therapists or people who are working in the healthcare world, but also for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's what I like with your books.
Yeah, thank you. And I in English, I love the term befriending your nervous system. And I have no idea how you translated it, but I do love.
We have different ways. It depends.
I love what it feels like in English. I'll tell you how I came to that. I came to that because it felt like we were making friends with our nervous system, that we were getting to know, right, how it works. And when you make a friend, when you form a friendship, like you and I have a friendship, we met, gosh, I don't know how many years ago now, but we met and we started to get to know each other. And we have spent all of these years since truly deepening into that knowing of each other and connection. That's what I think we do with our nervous system. We first understand it sort of here, and then we understand it here. And so it's an ongoing connection we have with our nervous system. It's an ongoing conversation that happens moment to moment, that when we can tune in and listen to it, we get so much information. There's so much wisdom in our nervous system that we can tune into, and then it shapes how we navigate our daily lives. So if we think very simply, I like 3 organizing principles to really understand the nervous system: Neuroception, hierarchy, and co-regulation. And those are Steve's organizing principles as well. He then expands and has a lot of other ones, but they all could fit under these 3 organizing principles. So if we start with neuroception, which is a scientific word, I happen to love it. I think it's a great word. It probably sounds just like neuroception in French, yes?
Yes, it is neuroception.
Yeah, neuroception. Yeah. Steve created that word because there wasn't a word that fit in the English language, because perception is a cortical, a cognitive, brain-centered experience, and the nervous system is below the level of conscious awareness. So he created the word neuroception, which I think is just lovely. And neuroception is how your nervous system listens to what's going on in the world and makes an assessment: is it safe or not safe, moment to moment. And it uses 3 pathways. It listens inside your body, so that's the inside pathway. It listens outside in the environment, that's the outside pathway. And it listens to other nervous systems, that's the between pathway. And those 3 pathways are bringing you information all the time. And so in the beginning, when we're first learning to listen, it can feel a little overwhelming, right? It's like, oh, I'm getting bombarded by all of this information. So, we sort of dip a toe in. We have a chart that helps us identify the cues of safety, the cues of danger in those 3 pathways. We have ways to slow the process down, because in the beginning you want to become familiar and feel like you're being successful in doing it, right? That's why a lot of the exercises that I create are small bits that you get good at, and then you can do the next bit and the next bit. So, but that's neuroception. And neuroception, when the cues of safety feel bigger than the cues of danger, then you feel regulated and ready to engage in the world. And when the opposite is true, when the cues of danger feel bigger than the cues of safety, you then enter into a survival response, which takes us to the second organizing principle, which is hierarchy. And that's, again, Steve's brilliant work in identifying how we move from regulation to dysregulation of fight and flight, or the dysregulation of shutdown and collapse. And we do it in that order: regulated, activated, shut down, right? That's his beautiful work, this science that shows us this is how we do it. It's neuroception that takes you to one of those places. If my neuroception is one of safe enough, I move into regulation. And that is called, again, we have a couple scientific terms, not very many, but a couple. This one, regulation, is ventral. It's called ventral vagal. And then, in our work, we invite people to name it in whatever way they want, right? Could be my happy place, my sunny place, my place of peace, whatever you want to call it. But the scientific name is ventral vagal. And when I'm feeling safe, I go to ventral vagal. And I can then regulate, and I can connect, and I can think clearly, and I can be purposeful and follow my passion. All of the things that we humans long to do, right? When neuroception is one of unsafety, it then takes us not to ventral, which is the top of the hierarchy, but it takes us first to the next lower level, which is sympathetic fight and flight. And I think everybody knows that place, right? The fight.
That's the stress. That's the place where many people live in the stressful world. And
we're overwhelmed. And
we're overwhelmed, and we're so much living.
Chaotic, disorganized jumble of energy, right? Mm-hmm. Which, again, your nervous system is simply taking you there because it thinks you're in danger, and it feels that energy that's directed at fight or flight is what's going to save you. Right. So we want to sort of appreciate our nervous system. That's part of befriending, is appreciating even when it's taken you to a survival state. It's done it because it feels you're in danger. Right. So the other place it can take you, it takes you to sympathetic, that fight and flight place, when it feels you're in danger. It feels you're in extreme danger. It takes you to the bottom of the hierarchy, which is called dorsal vagal. And that's the place of shutdown, collapse, disappear, disconnect. I have no energy to do anything, right? Sympathetic, I'm flooded with energy. It's driven energy. In dorsal, it's like, I have no energy. Can't do anything. Again, in service of your safety, right? The nervous system thinks if you get very quiet, don't move, don't do anything, fly under the radar, you're going to survive. Right? And then you can come back to life. And again, this is your nervous system making the choice, not your brain. right? It's important for people to recognize that you don't get to choose. Your biology chooses for you, right? And I think when we understand that, we can have a little compassion for what happens to us and what happens with others, right? I didn't choose to have a rage attack. I didn't choose to shut down and collapse. My biology chose that on my behalf to keep me safe. That said, it doesn't mean I'm not responsible for understanding, finding a way to come back to regulation, and then clean up the mess I've made when I was dysregulated. So we want to make sure we understand that too. I didn't choose it, but I'm still responsible to make it right afterwards, right? So that's hierarchy. So we had neuroception, hierarchy. The last one's co-regulation. And I think co-regulation is one of the hardest, because we have to find safe people to come into connection with. And for many of us, our nervous system holds the belief people are dangerous, right? The nervous system learned that growing up. People were, either abusive to us or unpredictably around, right? We couldn't count on them. And the nervous system is very wise. And if that's your experience, it stops reaching out. It's going to depend on my own capacity. It's going to self-regulate and not co-regulate. We can survive with self-regulation only, but we cannot live a true life of well-being and thrive unless we also have others to co-regulate with, right? And so that I think is challenging. It's challenging in everyday life. We have people that we can't count on. I think everybody has people that we wish we could count on but can't. And then if we're lucky enough, we have a couple people we really do know I could call them anytime, day or night. I could count on, right? And then everything in between. There's a continuum of that sense of safety with others and co-regulation, right? Like
how would you define co-regulation?
So co-regulation to me is the what I do with others to come to that place of ventral safety connection. So it's this reciprocity that happens. Like I might be dysregulated and reach out to you and you're regulated, and you then help me come into regulation. Or the opposite might be true. You might reach out to me, or we both might be regulated and we enter into the joy of that place of back and forth sharing of energy. So co-regulation it has a lot of different facets to it, right? It's what parents offer kids, right? We offer our children co-regulation. We offer our partners, the sense that we are safe and they can be safe with us, right? Colleagues, coworkers, friends. I mean, really, co-regulation is, I think, what helps the world feel safe, right? If I can be regulated and offer that. And remember, through neuroception, I don't even have to say it out loud. I can just be regulated, and I'm inviting other people to come into connection because they get the message through their nervous system that I'm safe, that I'm inviting them in, right? Isn't that fascinating? You can do it without ever saying a word. Yeah.
So for those who want to dive into this polyvagal theory, you didn't talk about, I know people are really, it's really fashion today to talk about the vagus nerve, which is part of the nervous system, but which is not the whole. It's important to understand really the whole nervous system. And maybe we could talk about it, but I want to, for people who want to dive into that, we have translated one of your a really interesting book, which is Anchored, which is Ancré in French.
Yes.
So this was released about not a little less than 2 years ago in French. We are happy that it's really one of our best sellers. So maybe
people really want to understand their nervous system, right? They may not put it in that way, right? But when they begin to read Anchored, they will come into connection with their nervous system. But people want to understand why they're doing the things they're doing. And we've discovered that it really is more about, what's happening in your body, because your body, your nervous system feeds information to your brain through the vagal pathway. The vagus nerve feeds 80% of the information comes from your brain, from your body to your brain. And then your brain's job is to make sense of it in some way. So people are starting to discover, and yes, the vagus is very fashionable. If you, do a Google search for vagus, you will get, gazillion entries, what to do, how to hack your vagus, the simple ways to be careful, I will say, when you read those. But the vagus nerve is in scientific research as well, is being really looked at as a way to create both physical and psychological well-being. So that information travels from your vagus to your brain then makes up a story. If we start with the nervous system and the vagus, rather than starting with the brain and the story, we're starting from the source, right? And that's one of the things that Anchored does, is it helps people start from the source and begin to understand, what is happening that then leads to these thoughts, these feelings, these behaviors, this physical sensation in my body.
So it's both understanding the nervous system, but there's also a lot of practices or exercises inside, and people can read many in different ways. They are not obliged to read from page 1 to page 232.
No, exactly.
How would you say, what would you, and who is this book for?
Yeah. So Anchored is really for it's probably for both and. I love both and the nervous system loves both and, right? The nervous system loves to work with danger and safety. I love to work with clinicians and curious humans. The Anchored was written more for curious humans. So for people who might not be in therapy, and yet clinicians have taken to loving the book and using the exercises from it and having their clients read along as they're doing the exercises. So again, that was a beautiful discovery that happened. You can read Anchored in sort of any way you want, because each chapter is going to give you a piece of the nervous system and some practices that go with it. The beginning of the book really lays out what we just talked about, the hierarchy, neuroception, coregulation, in more depth and detail. And then after that, you kind of can say, where do I want to dive in this week or this month? And again, that's respecting the nervous system's need for choice. Choice is one of the things our nervous systems need. So when you get a book and you say, you need to start here and go through sequentially every one, for me, that feels like the nervous system is being told to do something, and it's going to have a response, which is not going to be, that sounds like fun, right? The nervous system is going to say, no, that feels like I'm confined and trapped, and it will have a survival response. So Anchored is really written so that read the beginning so you understand the principles, and then you can look at the chapter headings and go, what do I feel like doing today? Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think the books that I've written, they've all been that way. I want to offer people, dive in. Where do you want to go? Maybe read a little bit and see, or maybe you just open it, and wherever you open it is where you go. It's kind of fun, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And for the people, so some people, the practices are sometimes a little, people don't feel always comfortable with the practices. So what I suggest, I don't know what you think about it, is maybe you read it, because it's really different. You have the theory or the text or the story, because it's you can read it as a story, as a novel. And then you have some practices that are identified as practices, and people can skip the practices, read the book, and come back.
Absolutely. And again, that's when you start to listen right? We think about what's the wisdom of our nervous system, right? And people might think, well, it's my brain. That's fine. Wherever you're thinking the information is coming from. If you get a yes, go ahead and keep going. If you get a no, try a different place in the book. If you get a maybe, play with it. Right. And so that's really what happens is sometimes we'll read the story, that the science behind whatever it is we're going to do. And then there's a practice or a couple of practices. You get to the practice and you go, ooh, this sounds interesting. Let me do it. Or you get to the practice and go, no, thank you. And that's fine. I like to say there's no right or wrong way to do this. That's just the way of your nervous system. So follow what your wisdom is telling you, and that's one of the keys in all of these books and all of the writings and all of the practices is to tune in to what your nervous system, your body brain system is telling you in this moment, and respect it. Right? Don't override it. We're taught to override that information all the time. Ignore it. Right? Your body says this feels too much. Your brain says no, you have to. And we're taught to go with the brain, right? And so we do it, but then we pay a price because the nervous system is giving you the physiological information that's saying, please don't do this. It's too much. And you're going to pay a price. So my work, my writing, the practices is trying to help you, yes, listen to the brain and honor what the nervous system is asking of you.
So if people are interested, they can find it in all the bookstores in France, in Switzerland, in Belgium, in Canada. It's also available on ebook, and it's also available as an audiobook. So people can choose their way of diving into the polyvagal theory with you and in Anchored.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes me happy. And I'm thinking I would like to listen to it in an audiobook because I want to hear it in French. That would be lovely.
I will send it to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our next book that I want to talk about is coming out in March, or I don't have it. I just have the cover.
Beautiful.
It's coming in March, March 10, and we're having a conversation together on March 11. So we'll talk about it, certainly, during our summit. What about this? So it's in English, it's this one. It's a polyvagal prompts, and in French, it will be Mon Journal de pratique polyvagale, which is my journal of polyvagal practices.
Love it.
Because prompts is not very easy to translate into French.
Again.
We found. I think I'm happy with what we found as a title. Yeah. So what are those prompts or polyvagal practices that you offer in this book? And you've written that with Courtney Rolfe.
With Courtney, yes, yeah. It's interesting. Courtney is one of my trainers in my long-term clinical training program, and she kept asking me because her clients were asking for certain ways, small ways of doing things, and she was showing me, and I said, "Oh, that would be a lovely, collection of prompts." And I invited her to, write a book around that, and she said, and our publisher said, write it together. So this was a joint adventure. It was a joint adventure where it ended up being really lovely, a lovely collaboration. And for people who have tried to do something with another person, the ups and downs of that. And both of our nervous systems had moments of being very regulated in co-regulation and then very dysregulated and trying to figure out what do we do to come back into connection. So even the writing of the book was a beautiful autonomic nervous system exercise, I would say. But we ended up with a structure where each of the practices starts with a quote from some of my writing, from one of my books somewhere, a quote that anchors the practice, and then gives you a practice to bring a way of befriending, getting to know, or shaping your nervous system alive, and then a space to do it. And it ended up being these simple practices, right? In the English language, a prompt is going to be some little thing that has you reflect in a certain way. And so it's not a big, long commitment. And this really is one of the books where you could just simply open, and whatever page you open to is going to be what you do that morning or that day. And each of the practices or the prompts should not take you, a ton of time to do. You can sort of dip in, dive in, and do some writing, and then you might return to it later. And I think we grouped some things together so that if you wanted to work with, say, glimmers, if you wanted to be playing with what are the small moments that bring me happiness and safety, there's probably 3 practices, right? So you could deepen into a specific area, but you don't have to, because again, you simply can open the book wherever you like. If I was going to do it, and I've got my English one, if I did it and I just opened it, I just started with, every nervous system is created with a ventral vagal pathway. Our biology includes this wired-in pathway of safety and connection. No matter how challenging our lives are, we can come home to safety. Isn't that beautiful? We can come home to safety. And then this practice is about solitude. It talks a little about the science of solitude, and then it gives you a prompt. Where in your environment can you find a place of solitude? And it gives you a place to draw or write, or, more prompts to really bring that alive. I'm thinking that might be a good one. That solitude sounds a bit inviting to me right in this moment as I'm looking at my week in my life. So I might do that one later. And if you opened it up and you thought, oh, I am so not in a place of solitude today, close it, open it up to another place. Yeah. Yeah.
And what people need, so there's space to write or draw
yes.
for each prompt. It's
the prompt,
exactly.
It gives you space to write.
Yeah.
And I'm sure your French book is going to be as beautiful. I love that it, it becomes sort of a journal, my own, I write in it and I have my own knowing of my nervous system, which I think is really a lovely
That's what
thing.
we called it. It's a journal.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect.
Yeah. So there are 84 different prompts.
Yeah.
And it's really this is something to bring glimmers in your life, in your daily life. Maybe we could just talk a little bit about glimmers, because it's really something that you came with.
Glimmers. I know. I coined a word too. Steve got neuroception. I coined glimmers, which who knew at the time? I first used the word glimmers in my work with complex trauma survivors. We were mapping their system. And this is another beautiful both and of our biology. We were working with the triggers, which is what brings people into therapy. But we also have to identify the moments of okayness. And so I needed a word, so they became the glimmers. So we were mapping triggers and glimmers. And glimmers has, in the past few years, moved out of the therapy world into the general public, which is lovely. Everybody talks about glimmers now, which is so fun. Glimmers are those tiny moments when you feel a spark of okayness, of joy, of happy, of quiet, of rest, of play, whatever it is, any of those moments that have a flavor of that neuroception of safety. And that's a glimmer, and glimmers are all around us. So part of the glimmer practice is to notice the glimmers in your day, to stop and appreciate them, right? And to really, as we mark those moments, they begin to add up in our nervous system. And I do want to say, as we're talking about glimmers, that glimmers are not a form of toxic positivity. They're not a way to just focus on the good and ignore the suffering. What they really are is a way to increase your capacity to stay in regulation, so you can turn toward the suffering and you can work with the suffering, not relive it. Right. So they're a lovely way in the clinical world of creating a foundation of being able to process trauma. And in the everyday world we're all in, they're a way that we can notice that the moments of goodness, so that we can more effectively deal with all of the suffering that's happening. So Glimmers have been a lovely addition to the world, I think. And people send me glimmers regularly in my inbox. A glimmer pops up and people are sharing their glimmers. So again, they're all around us, right? They are everywhere. You will bump into a glimmer, I promise you, in your day. Have you bumped into one yet today?
Yes, of course, being with you.
Oh,
opening and seeing you.
lovely. Yes. Yeah. And then as you say that, I feel it, and both of us feel it come alive again, right? That's the joy of glimmers. And then, find a glimmer buddy. That's one of the invitations. Find somebody and, send a glimmer back and forth every day, right? It's a tiny practice. Glimmers are small yet incredibly powerful in our nervous systems. And the scientific research, this is the thing I love about this way of working, is there's science underneath it, right? It's not just a thing somebody dreams up and says, oh, this sounds good. It is that, and there's science underneath it. So the science tells us that the more we have these small moments of regulation, the more access we have to that. And actually the set point, our baseline level of regulation increases. And so in my work with trauma survivors, I was looking for little things they could do that felt within reach. And this is true for, every human. What we do has to feel like it's reachable, right? And when I reach it, when I find a glimmer, my body and my brain enjoy it and says, oh, let's look for another one. So it's not so hard to do. And that is part of the work, with the nervous system, is finding things that aren't so hard to do, right? They're easy, they're enjoyable, and they shape your system towards connection.
For those who want to put glimmers of joy and connection, I really highly recommend the Mon Journal de Pratique Polyvagal, or the Polyvagal Prompts of Deb Dana and Courtney Rolfe. And there's another one that is coming out, that just come out in the US or in the English-speaking world, not only in the US, and that we're translating. It's been translated. It's just being proofread, I think, now. It should be out in June or September. We don't know yet. Is
that the workbook?
It's the workbook.
I love it.
Yes. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the workbook. And if people want to really dive into it, your work is incredible, and it helps. Yeah. It really helps, as even if you whether you are a therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, healthcare professional, or really for everyday life. So what about the workbook?
Yeah, so the workbook came as a sort of a growth out of Anchored, right? Sounds True, who published Anchored, asked if I could do a workbook that would take some of the things in Anchored and bring them to life in a workbook form, and then add more practices. And I love the workbook because, like the prompts, it invites people into an experience of getting to know their nervous system in a different way. And the workbook is divided into two parts. The first half of the book is befriending your nervous system. So it's all the ways you can get to know how your nervous system works. And then the second is coming home to safety and connection, which is practices that really shape your system in that direction. So in this way, you can open it up anywhere you want and decide, am I in a befriending mood today? Do I want to deepen my understanding, or do I want to do as a practice that shapes me towards connection? And I've never done a workbook before, right? And so it was fun because
can you show it?
Yeah. So there's the workbook. That's the cover, and then what? Let me show you. Well, like it has things where with pages to write on and descriptions. What each section has is, it starts with some writing about where the exercise is going to take you, and then it gives you the directions for the exercise and a place to do the exercise. So it's fun, but it has things. It has lists that you can, circle or cross out. It has places to write stories. It has prompts. It has prompts with boxes. I think it's just a lovely sort of, I don't know, inviting and a bit. It's not so serious, which I like. Right? You can dive into it and really get to know yourself on a deep level, but without feeling like you're doing an academic text. So I think it's fun in that way. Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think what I've heard, because has just been released not too long ago in the English speaking world. And what I've heard from my US colleagues is their clients are buying the workbook, and then they are doing sections with them and bringing it to their sessions and going over it. And other clients are just going through and reporting what they learned. So it's a lovely connection between clinical and curious human.
So it's really a workbook for everyone.
It is. I mean, it's just, I have discovered more recently that this is where I'm drawn at the moment. I'm drawn to, I think if I could wave a wand and have a wish, everybody would have a basic understanding of their nervous system, because it helps us understand how we're human. And it helps us look at others and ourselves differently, right? It's the common denominator in our human experience. It brings us together. And I think we're living in a world that is tearing us apart. We kept getting put into small groups and labeled and categories. And yet the nervous system brings us all together. I think that's what is needed in the world right now. And so, if the journal, the practice journal, calls you, please do that. If Anchored, is a lovely place to start there. If the workbook, when it's translated, do that. I'm trying to offer all sorts of ways for people to really get to know how they are human, so that we might change the way our world is working at the moment. It's kind of a lofty goal as I say it. However, it is what I believe in my heart, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's also what we're trying to do at Quantum Way. Yeah. And so if people want to dive into your work, these are 3 important books, and I would say take them all. They will find a place in your in your bookshelf to put the 3 of them. And also there are some programs that we have translated from your work with Polyvagal Institute. So a very simple one, short ones and bigger ones. And I hope one day we'll do the foundation to really dive into your work, so people can really, as you say, both and go into the writing with the books. It's really at your own pace, but also go with the videos, because sometimes it illustrates better. You explain exercise, you explain practice, how to do it. You show us how to do it. So this is also like a good both and. So thank you. Is there anything you want? You always say that Polyvagal Theory is the science of feeling safe enough to take the risk of living and to take the risk of connection, because sometimes it's risky to connect.
It is risky to connect, and yet it is what we long for. Right? I think our nervous system longs to be in connection. Right? It's a biological longing. I also think our nervous system longs to be in regulation, which then supports connection. And I think it knows the way to get there. That's one of the sustaining beliefs that I have. I really do believe my nervous system knows the way. Right. And so, I keep trying to invite other people into knowing your nervous system knows the way. And the books and the practices and the exercises sort of set you on that path. And then your nervous system is going to help you find the way home to regulation.
And I want to honor Dr. Stephen Porges' work, bringing the Polyvagal Theory into the world. We have another book from Steve Porges, Our Polyvagal World.
Love it.
Yeah, and I love the cover too.
Oh, I do as well. That's a lovely book too. Yeah, lovely. And yes, if we think about Steve and his work, without Steve, none of this would be possible.
No.
Steve has opened up the world for, so many things. He is, I will say, just to talk about him for a moment, he is brilliant. He's a brilliant scientist, and he is also one of the kindest humans I've ever met. And what a lovely combination, that brilliant scientist and kind human. You can't beat that. That is really lovely.
So welcome to the Polyvagal family.
Exactly.
Thank you, Deb Dana.
Mm.
And thank you, Deb, my friend.
It's been lovely to just be here together. My nervous system is soaking it all in.